Happy Monday and welcome to the first session of Bar Convent Brooklyn's Italian Spirits webinar series, sponsored by the Italian Trade Agency. With us are Livio Lauro, today's awesome speaker, and Daniela Porro from the Italian Trade Agency, who will tell you a little bit about their organization in a second. But before we start, I want to share some housekeeping notes with you. First of all, I want to let you know that we are recording today's webinar and that we are sending out an email with the recording to you tomorrow. If you're having difficulty hearing us and are listening through your computer, please check that your speaker volume is turned up. If you're still facing issues, you can message us using the chat box, which is located on the right side of your screen. Feel free to ask questions at any time through the same chat box as well. We made a handout available for you to download under the handout section on the right side as well. That being said, take it away, Daniela.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We're very excited to be partnering with Bar Convent Brooklyn to promote Italian spirits. Sadly, given the circumstances, obviously we can't be together right now, but this is the best next thing, and we're very happy to be here with Livio as well. He's our amazing educator throughout all of this. These online educational seminars are part of a larger spirits promotion project that started back in 2018, and with the rising popularity of mixology and the use of Italian spirits behind the bar, we continued this project throughout the years, and so here we are today. The ITA is a government agency, and the Food and Wine Department that's based in New York, which Paola and I are a part of, focuses on increasing the awareness of Italian spirits in the United States, which range from distillates to fortified wines to liqueurs and cordials. We're thrilled to share this series with you, and we hope that you get to learn more about, the products, the traditions, the ingredients, and the craftsmanship that go behind every single bottle that Italian producers put out into the market. We're extremely proud of Italian-made spirits, and we hope that this webinar will be useful to you the next time you want to purchase a spirit at a liquor store. Our series is going also to continue on Thursday, the 27th, with an international food pairing webinar, obviously still hosted by Livio, and as well as another one a week from today on the 31st on vintage Italian cocktails. Our hashtags for the project are #DrinkItalian and #ItalianSpirits if you want to share us on social media. And we also have a website which is called italianspirits.us, where we have a lot more information about categories and brands that go a lot more into detail there. And you can always feel free to email us at newyork.ice.it if you have any specific questions about the seminar or other specific thoughts. And now I give it to the man of the hour, Livio, and he's going to introduce himself and give this awesome webinar. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Daniela. Please give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Hello, everybody. I'm excited to spend the next 30 to 45 minutes with you today together to talk about Amari, understanding them, and discovering this really amazing bitter Italian liqueur. Today, we're going to take a really deep look into them. Of course, we have 45 minutes, so we can get quite a bit done and understand and really dive deep into what is this really, really cool seminar. We will do that so that I can help really with all of you with understanding how to suggest, serve, and sell Amari to your guests, because this is important for both guest experience and of course to the bottom line. And we are at a time right now where the bottom line is extremely important. Before I do that, I want to thank you all for joining me, because I do know that it's a time in life where we are all trying to figure out what our future looks like. We're living through a global pandemic, something that is unprecedented in our lifetimes, and the fact that you all came in today to join me and to learn a little bit more about Amari, despite what's going on, is a really big testament for your passion, and we don't take that for granted, and thank you so much. So for now, we'll meet through the screen, but one day we will meet together and we will enjoy a nice Amaro. If we haven't met before, my name is Livio Lauro. I grew up on an island in southern Italy called Ischia. It's the neighbor island of Capri on the Amalfi Coast. On that island alone, we make quite a few Amari. Now, if you think about it, the island is very small, 16 miles and 55,000 people, and that island alone makes several Amari. So you can imagine how many of them are made throughout the wonderful boot of Italy. I lived in Ischia for over 20 years, in Italy for over 20 years, between Ischia and Rome. And I spent my life there as a bartender and as a consumer. So I was able to see both the perspective from both sides of the bar. This webinar today is brought to you by Amaro Montenegro, Amaro Ramazzotti, Amaro Meletti, and the Spiritual Machine, which is an innovative company based out of Turin. They create custom tailored spirits. And so we'll talk a little bit more about them throughout the course of the seminar, but to know more about them and how you can create your own liqueur, you can visit them at the spiritualmachine.it. Of course, more info on our partners will come. So my Italian-American background will bring you the utmost Italian purist philosophy on these products. But the fact that I've lived in the United States for about half of my life will also bring you that more open-minded and perhaps less obnoxiously traditional opinion. So I really hope to balance properly tradition and heritage with how the consumer really enjoys drinking Amaro today. We're going to keep today really interactive, so feel free to comment or ask any questions. And I will occasionally check in with Daniela so that she can tell me if there are any questions that you have. I do appreciate a lot of people have already asked some questions that I will be addressing through the course of the seminar, but please feel free to raise your hand at any time. As a matter of fact, why don't we just start right now? Let's get the typing juices flowing. If you can tell me whether you actually like the taste of bitter or not. Is bitter something that you appreciate, or is bitter something that you do not appreciate? And it's not an Amaro question, it's a bitter question. Does the taste of bitter actually float your boat or not? Now, I'll check in for those answers. And in the meantime, I am sure that it is no news to anybody here that for the past 5 years, the bitter flavor has been crowned the hottest thing that you can drink. And that statement holds true, whether it's food or beers or, of course, our beloved Amari and other types of liqueurs like that. Now, in Italy, Italians have been enjoying Amaro for a very, very long time. When I tended bar in Italy, I poured an Amaro as frequently as I poured a beer when I bartended in America. And so that's how often this beverage is consumed. However, you know, when people look at a bottle, at a shelf of Amari or at a back bar of Amari, the shelf looks a little bit like this. It's a little blurry. But the Italians, despite the fact that they have a proverb that says, to taste sweet, you must taste bitter. Despite all that, even in Italy, most Italians, they stick with one brand. They really don't understand the difference in flavors. It's very local. And so it is very common to have a lot of confusions. Now think about it, in Italy in the 1100s, at the University of Salerno, which was about, let's say 65 miles from my hometown and about 180 miles south of Rome, we have been making and creating bitter liqueurs and using bitters for medicinal treatments since the 1100s for quite a while. Yet despite this very large or this very longevity of herbal use, even in Italy, we sometimes have a little bit of confusion. So if you polled both bartenders in America and to some extent in Europe and consumers and to some extent even producers, and you ask them specific questions, you would see that answers to those questions would vary greatly. So even within the industry, even within the country itself, there's a very blurry image of what Amari are. This means that, of course, this, let's call it confusion, can negatively affect the bottom line. It can negatively affect our guest experience. And the reason why I say the bottom line is because I think we all agree that the sale of an Amaro is an incremental sale, right? Nobody's drinking an Amaro instead of their glass of wine to flush their food, or nobody's drinking their Amaro neat instead of a mojito. And so it really is an incremental sale. And when there's so much confusion in the category, and when there's so much nebulousness on what exactly an Amaro is, then it really does represent a lost sale. Now, let me check in with Daniela real quick and see if there are any questions that I can, or comments that I can address.
No questions for now. We just have a lot of Amaro lovers, thank goodness. So
Yay! All right. I love that. I love that. I love that. So going back to the confusion, this is what basically, again, I'm keeping this slide up because this is, of course, what a lot of people see when they look at a shelf of Amari. Basically, a blur set of bottles. They all have similar label colors. Relatively speaking, a similar bottle shape, an amber or yellow or red label, and I mean a tan or yellow label, and to some extent like an amber to dark color. But then what you do is perhaps you decide to look at their label in hopes of getting a little bit more clarification on that vagueness. And you'll get something like this, right? So on the left of your screen, you'll see some of those traditional terms that you find on a lot of Italian products, including Amari, which is speciale. Okay, well, it's special. Originale. Okay, well, it's original. Antico. Okay, well, it's ancient. Premiata. Oh, it was awarded. Ditta specializzata. Okay, so the firm specializes in making Amari. All of those are not very helpful, right? Although they are displayed with pride because, of course, there's family heritage, there's a rich history, and so a brand and producers that have rich history to brag about are going to, of course, put it on the label. But then those type of things typically do not leave a lot of room to understand more about the product. Now we do get the ABV, which of course is important. Those are some in Amari, right? It's somewhere between 16% and 40%, which once again shows us how broad this category can be. And of course, for those that are made in Italy, you will find the term that is made in Italy. You will find the term made in Italy, which of course is important for the Italian producers. On the other side, right, you see the most, on the other side of your screen, I should say, you'll see the most typical label visuals. They all have some form of a shield, they'll have a ribbon, they'll have some medals, they'll have the year the company was founded. Now, it's funny, some Amari are the flagship of the company that produces that Amaro. Some Amari are part of a line extension of perhaps another product that was made prior to it. So sometimes when you see a date on a bottle of Amaro, it doesn't necessarily represent the date the Amaro was created, but it represents more what exactly the year that the company was founded. And so that too can create a little bit more confusion. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and give you a little bit of more of my face, and then we'll get back to the screen in a second. But in the interim, Daniela, any questions for me?
No, nothing as of right now.
All righty, appreciate that. And so now, how do we make this category user-friendly as we do with other style of beverages? We've talked about a lot of the problems, the blurriness, the confusion, and all of that. But how do we really, how are we able to show the consumer how to really try it and how to drink it and how to enjoy it? Well, it's no different than gin and scotch, whiskey and bourbon and all the other styles. They too have many different variables. But you have to try to make those variables very simple. I believe that there is an Amaro style for everybody out there. The problem is when somebody drinks their Amaro for the first time and it's not a match, then what happens is they will completely dismiss the category most of the times. You know, the people that produce beer like to say, when you drink our beer and it's out of code and it doesn't taste fresh, you dismiss our beer forever, and that's why we want our beer to be fresh. The wine producers, of course, have a similar issue for many, have had a similar issue for many years with corked wine, right? You drink a Chardonnay, it was corked. Most consumers don't know how to detect that, so they will drink that corked Chardonnay and never drink it again because they don't like that wine, they don't like that brand, they don't like Chardonnay, or to some extent, they don't like any type of wine at all. And so because of this phenomenon, right, the bar loses its potential for incremental sale and the guest experience goes down the drain. So, you know, this is the issue that I would like to solve with you today. Now, this also may not be news to you, but of course, people are sensitive to bitter flavors in different concentrations. So there is no one size fits all of Amaro. People also like fruit and sweet flavors in different concentrations. And so, you know, balancing those two proportions to find a match to their bitter sweet tolerances can be quite a challenge, but we're going to get as close as we can today to learning all that. Before I do, just one other check-in, Daniela, for you.
No, all good for now.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful.
Actually have one. Are particular flavor profiles associated with particular regions? From Diane.
Oh, what a great question. To some extent, yes, and to some extent, no. I hate having to give more vague answers to, you know, somewhat of a vague category, but you'll see, for instance, that in general, it would be safe to say that Southern Italy has more of the, what we call agrumato, right? The more fruity and sweeter styles of Amari. And as you go north and as you make it up to Northern Italy, you will get more of the herbal and more of the piney and more of the bitter flavor profiles. But of course, as you start looking into producers closely, you realize that that rule kind of goes down the drain. Why? Because Ramazzotti, which was created in Milan, which of course is Northern Italy, is a very sweet and is very orange in profile. And some of the ones that are perhaps made down in the south, I'm just looking at my bottles here, and perhaps some of the ones that are made in the south can be extremely bitter. So you really, there really is not such a thing, unfortunately. But thanks for that question, and I do appreciate it. There are about 24 bitter taste genes in our mouth, and of course, that concentration of bitterness dictates how much we are tolerant to it. And so what happens is, what I might find to be more bitter, you might find to be less bitter, and of course, so are your guests. But the most common ingredients that you will find in Amaro that will give them bitterness are things like the gentian root, which is initially kind of sweet, but then it'll turn very bitter. Or the cinchona and quinine, which will initially be bitter, and then it'll turn and give you like a little bit of a citrus tang. Or there's the cassia bark, which gives you a red flower flavor, but then also it will turn very bitter. milk thistle, which some herbalists say it's sweet, but others will say it's bitter. So what exactly is it? Again, your palate will dictate a lot of those flavors. Lavender, which is herbaceous and woody and smoky. So when you're getting those herbaceous and smoky Amari into somewhat earthy, you will know that there's lavender playing a good part of it. Dandelion will make it kind of like a light tea. And of course, wormwood that will make it, will give it bitterness. But keep in mind, there are hundreds of other bitters, bitter ingredients out there that you can find in a bottle of Amaro. Typically, those are your most common ones from a bitter perspective, right? And one thing I should mention, which again goes without said, but how exactly does bitter aid our digestion? How does it really do that? Well, they stimulate, Amari stimulate our digestive juices. And so like our stomach acids and our enzymes, and they break down the food naturally. And so this allows us to absorb all of those nutrients that are in our food very naturally. The bitter can pull this off. Why? Because poison is bitter, and our body releases those enzymes to protect us from any potential harm. As an example, right, a poisonous mushroom is bitter, but a non-poisonous mushroom is actually earthy and not bitter. And so because our body has been inherently taught to look out for bitter flavors, these enzymes are triggered, and therefore it is actually true that they will help us with our digestion. Now, on the flip side, there are also some non-bitter poisons out there, so it's not a complete science, but there's really a lot of truth to that statement. Now, we talked about the bitter flavors. Let's discuss the sweet and the fruity flavors that you will find in Amari. Well, they can come from bittersweet oranges, or the cedro citrus, or the lemon. They can come from baking style of spices. They can come from flowers. And of course, the sweetness can come from a sweetener. Mostly sugar is used, but also sugar beet is used, but also honey can be used, as you will find in the Varnelli line of Amari. So if you go on the internet, right, and you will you look for styles of Amari, you'll see that they are typically categorized in a very interesting way. And they'll be more like, there's a light style, which I do agree with. Then there's a carciofo style, which has an artichoke in it. Then there's the medium, which to some extent I can agree with. But then there's the rabarbaro style, which has the rhubarb in it. Then there's the tartufo style, which has the truffles in it. Then there's the quina style, which I can somewhat agree with as well, that has the cinchona bark in it. Or there's the alpine that is flavored with alpine herbs. And then there's fernet, which is more bitter. And really, when you start distilling Amari that way, it doesn't really give us much of a way to understand it, because the key ingredients such as carciofo and rabarbaro and all of those can really give off different flavors. For instance, on the island where I grew up, we have one that is made with arugula. It's called rucolino. Now, does that mean we should create an arugula style Amaro? Or should we find a better way to actually categorize the Amari? Now, when you look at gin styles, right? Gins are similar to Amari in that their combination of citrus and piney and herbaceousness, and to some extent even a little bit of bitter tang to it, can vary brand to brand, country to country. Yet when we really want to sell or suggest a gin to a consumer, we really distill it down to, would you like something that is juniper forward or something that is not juniper forward, right? And so most of the times we also call that the Western style versus the London dry style, with the Western style being a little more easy to drink. I'm going to go ahead and show you my screen. There it is right there. So what I have come up with is I have come up with a different way of categorizing Amari. And just like in gin, it's Western style or London dry, or just like in Scotch whiskey, right? For many, many years, the whiskey experts like Michael Jackson, not the singer, but Michael Jackson, the whiskey expert, and all the other ones, they would talk about the lowlands, they would talk about the highlands, and they would talk about one side of the highlands and the other side of the highlands, until they really figured out that was just really confusing. And they came up with the concept of inland and maritime, right? So when you look at single malt whiskeys, they can be from the inland, which are typically heathery and honey-like, or they can be maritime, which means they could be very briny and iodine-y, et cetera, et cetera. Well, in my opinion, Amari showed the same opportunity. And the best way to explain Amari to your guests, to your customers, is by going with medicinal style versus pastry style. So there's a medicinal and there's a pastry, and all Amari will literally fit into this category. Now, if you look at this wheel that I created, right, you look at the right center of the wheel, there's that burgundy color, which is medicinal, and then there's that pastry pink circle, which is, of course, represents the sweeter flavors. Now, the medicinal style, when you get bitter, piney, vegetal, earthy, and any of these other flavor profiles, roasted, when the Amari typically represent those flavors greater than the ones on the other side, they are called a medicinal style of Amaro. And then on the other side, sweet, baking spices, fruity, floral, and tropical. When you get an Amaro that favors those flavors more, you will get what I like to call a pastry style. Now, there are some herbaceous and balsamic flavors. I have thrown those in the middle. Those play well in the sandbox. Those do very well at enhancing the medicinal style, and they also do extremely well at enhancing the pastry style. So as a consequence to this slide, as you can see also, there's that bottom line that kind of shows you the left is the pastry, the middle ground, and then the medicinal to the right. This way is an easier way for your guests to understand which Amaro to drink. And obviously this is because Amari display varieties of flavors that are an assembly really of three flavor profiles. There's citrus, there's sweet, and then there's the bitter and herbaceous portion of it, right? The sweetness can be regulated. Some people don't add any sugar, but the sweetness is adjusted, right? But the citrus and the herbaceous, those are the two that are giving us the different styles of Amari that we are looking for today. So just keep in mind, pastry and medicinal are the two things to do. So your very basic questions, once you have determined that somebody would like to try an Amaro, will help by asking some very simple questions. You can really help those people navigate through their drinking experience, if it's at a bar or a restaurant, or their purchase if it's at a liquor store shelf. So once, of course, you've determined that they really would like an Amaro, it's really basing those questions on understanding if they like something sweeter, or if they like something very bitter, or if they would like something more balanced. And of course, throughout the course of today, we will talk a little bit more about that. Any questions so far, Daniela, that I should be mindful of?
No, we're good for now. We can move on to the brands.
Awesome, 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 awesome. Okay, so with all right. So when you set up your shelf, and I have set them up here right behind me, okay? And I will be tasting a few today just to give you a little examples. When you set up your shelf or your back bar, you should really consider starting from the pastry, going to the center style, and then bringing it all the way to medicinal. I guess my best example would be if you were setting up a shelf for your bourbons at your bar or at your liquor store, you would perhaps start with the wheated bourbons more on one side. And so your Weller 12s, your Maker's Mark would be somewhere towards one side of the shelf. And then your Wild Turkey and your Elijah Craig's, which are more of a traditional mash bill of corn, would be in the middle. And then your high rise, such as Bullet or Basil Hayden or Four Roses single barrel, would be towards the other side. And then you would, in essence, try to figure out, right, from soft to sweet to spicy, what is the most common way of doing it. And so my shelf here starts from the pastry style, and it goes all the way to the medicinal style. And I'm going to go ahead and try the first Amaro that is actually a partner brand of today, which is Amaro Montenegro. Now, Amaro Montenegro is a traditional Amaro. It's distilled in Bologna, Italy. It's bottled at 23 alcohol by volume, and it is made from a secret blend of 40 botanicals. They're boiled and macerated and distilled into 6 notes. So one of the questions that I received prior to this webinar was, how are typically Amari made? Well, Amari, despite the fact that often you'll hear them say, well, we macerate a bunch of herbs. In essence, what they really do is they macerate herbs into different family members, and then which could be a minimum of 2, most commonly 4, 5, or 6, and then they blend these family of flavor profiles together. So in the case of Amaro Montenegro, they have 6 base notes, so they make 6 different infusions, and then they blend it with a 7th note, which they call the premio. Of the 40 botanicals that are in Amaro Montenegro, only 13 of them are given out, and that is a very common thing in these recipes, right? They'll give you a little something, and as the younger generations are taking over the family business, they're starting to give you a little bit more than perhaps the ancestors did, understanding that, you know, you really cannot copy this anyway, so I can hand you almost the entire recipe. It's going to be very difficult to really turn your product into Amaro Montenegro. So this product here, it starts slightly sweet. Definitely a pastry style, definitely right at the beginning of that shelf on the pastry style. It starts slightly sweet, then it turns gently bitter, and then you get this orange zest, coriander, cherry, vanilla. Of course, all these flavors are going to be very common for what you would consider a pastry style of Amaro. Very light, very delicate. The next brand I'm going to taste is Amaro Ramazzotti, and as you can see, it's made its way a little bit more towards the center of the shelf. It is still a pastry style. It is just more sweet, so it's getting more syrupy, right, as you would say, and a little bit more sweet. This Amaro here was born in 1850, and it's a secret blend of 33 fruits, herbs, and roots coming from all over the world. But in this Amaro, it's the Mediterranean orange that plays the key role in it. And so, of course, again, we're getting some more pastry style flavors. This recipe hasn't changed for over 200 years. Some of the ingredients that you'll find inside of this Amaro are rosemary and quinine and rhubarb and gentian. And an interesting fact actually about Ramazzotti is that he was the first producer to popularize Amari on a shelf in Italy, and coming from a product that is not wine-based. Now, as you know, in Italy, we have a lot of grapes, and so wine-based products are extremely popular. But Ramazzotti was the first to not do that. So ramazzotti has this nice little sweet start, and it gets really more baking spicy and cinnamon and cloves and nutmeg and allspice. And then it has this really interesting like root beer flavor to it. I love to mix it with vanilla ice cream, of course, because as we know, in the case of a root beer float, for instance, vanilla and cola-like, root beer-like flavors are extremely good. Before I jump to the next one, to the last one, I just wanted to check in with you, Paula.
No, no questions yet.
No questions yet. Okay, fantastic. All right, so let's move on to the last one, which is Meletti. So this is Amaro Meletti. This product is native to central Italy, which is a region called Le Marche. And this company here has been producing wonderful liqueurs since 1870. Of course, it's a unique blend of their proprietary ingredients, and most of the ingredients that they use are sourced from local growers. So they try to stay as close as they can to the flavors of the region of the Marche, and a lot of the producers that provide the ingredients that go inside of the bottle of Amaro Meletti actually only make ingredients for them. So they work exclusively for them. Some of the known botanicals that you will find in Meletti, of course, first and foremost is anise. If you know anything about the producer, anise is a really big ingredient for them. It's a big ingredient in that region. Of course, Meletti makes a sambuca and a few styles of anisettes, so they are a big anise producers. You also get clove and gentian, orange peel, saffron, maybe a violet flower. So, so this also is a pastry style Amaro, right? Very sweet, very, I almost like to say, to define the pastry style to a customer that is trying to understand what do you mean by pastry style, I almost like to say somebody shoved a cake in it, somebody shoved a pie inside my Amaro. So when you think of the word bitter, you're thinking, oh my God, this is going to be a terrible bitter experience. Quite the opposite. This is a delicious pastry in a glass. And so there you go. Lots of amazing, delicate floral notes. But we'll talk a little bit more about how to pair these Amari as well with these amazing flavors. I do want to talk about, before I get too carried away, the fourth partner, of course, of this webinar today, which is the Spiritual Machine. If you're thinking about creating your own Italian product, maybe a vermouth di Torino or an Amaro of some sorts, you might want to consider working with them. This is what they do. It's a brainchild of a group of people who share a vision to make amazing products. So they help you make the product that you have or that you've been dreaming about or that's in your brain. And so they have over 100 years of experience in working with botanicals, working with citrus fruits, and of course, balancing them together into what is going to be an amazing liqueur that you can make for yourself. One more check-in with you, Daniela.
Yes, I have two questions. The first one is if you could repeat what the main botanical in Montenegro was.
I'm sorry, I did not hear that. One more time, please.
They were asking what the main botanical in Montenegro was.
Oh, the main botanical, well, there's only 13 of them revealed. Vanilla, orange peels, and eucalyptus are the ones that I most get, but also I get like some cherry flavors, vanilla, orange zest, and I like to kind of call that combination of flavors marzipan. So when I'm getting all those flavors combined together, the main flavor is this almond pasty marzipan flavor. Thanks for the question. Any other ones?
And then somebody else said, I never thought of using ice cream with ramazzotti. What do you suggest to pair with Meletti and Montenegro?
Very, very good question. So of course, especially vanilla ice cream, right? It does well with all of them. So it's not really it's not really exclusive to Ramazzotti that I would say vanilla ice cream is the thing. However, because it has that root beer flavor to it, and most consumers are in fact familiar with the flavor of a root beer float, that came to mind. However, you can balance these out with other type of ice creams. I literally like the combination. I'm very basic, and I think you should always keep it simple in the Amaro world, and it's either vanilla, strawberry, chocolate, or mint, right? These 4 flavors will all give you a different Amaro experience and allow you to play with a different flavor experience. When it comes to the more bitter Amari, so we talked a lot about the pastry style. We didn't really cover a lot of the stuff over on the other side, starting with perhaps Braulio and the 2 Varnellis and the Fernets, right? Because they're very bitter, right? The more sweeter style, so a sweet chocolate ice cream would do very well. And thanks for those questions. I appreciate them. Any other ones out there?
Yeah, I have another one. So does the ABV in an Amaro change the taste? So does it become bitter or sweeter with the ABV change?
That is such a great question, and I appreciate you asking it. I feel like your head's in the right place. So in the case of Chinar, right, as you can see, they cranked up the proof, and as they cranked up the proof, the product went a little more herbaceous and bitter. And with the lower proof, it stays a little sweeter. And just to confirm that, actually, I asked Elisa from the Spiritual Machine. I said, Elisa, what exactly happens when you take the exact same Amaro recipe, exact same infusion times, exact same everything, but the alcohol content is lower? And she, in fact, confirmed, and of course, she's an expert in production of Amari. She, in fact, confirmed that when the Amari go lower in alcohol, the sweeter flavors jump in. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't make a bitter, lower in alcohol Amaro, right? That just means that if you take an Amaro that is an equal, everything equal, and you put down its alcohol, it goes sweeter. If you put up its alcohol, it goes more bitter, but you can make a low ABV bitter Amaro simply by making a low ABV Amaro with fewer aromas of fruit and of course less sugar in it. Great question. Any other questions for me?
I have one last question that I think you can answer together, probably the last one for time purposes. Is it possible to use Amaros as aperitif liqueurs, and how would you use them in cocktails?
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to be very quick. If I can have just 3 minutes, I will blast all those answers out. So Amari typically have a lot of sugar in it. Therefore, they're aperitivo, indigenous to aperitivo, simply because bitterness, of course, as it stimulates your appetite, your digestion, it also stimulates your appetite. However, they might have too much sugar in them. So the best way to enjoy an Amaro, if they are too sweet, as an aperitivo, is just to add a splash of soda, which is exactly what we do in Italy. So almost like you're making a gin and tonic, right? 2 parts of gin to 4 parts tonic water, 2 parts of Amaro to 4 parts or less, right, to your palate of soda water, will turn that bitter digestive experience into a wonderful appetite stimulating experience. I am going to, as far as the cocktails go, I'm going to just share a few quick ones that I like. So if you can all see my screen, this is called the Morgenthaler Grasshopper. Look at it, it only has 1 teaspoon of Fernet, and I'm getting to somewhere here. You will see that it's just a little splash of Fernet, gives it a nice sweet flavor. Now the next one you'll see here is the Hanky Panky, right? This was created by Ada Coleman. It too has only 2 dashes of Fernet, a little bit more but still it's a very small quantity. On the third one here, this is a paper plane. It was made, of course, by famous bartender Sam Ross. In this one, he uses 3/4 of an ounce of Amaro in his paper plane cocktail. And in the last one right here, right, I can't read the name because my thing is in front of it, but nonetheless, it is, of course, 2 ounces of Amaro. So what this really brings us to the fact is that Amari can be, unlike many other ingredients, unlike most other ingredients, you can use different concentrations in them and still make a balanced cocktail. Why is that? If you use a low amount of the bitter ones, right? Fernet is very bitter, and so that's why both Atacoma and Morgenthau are used a little bit. If you use the bitter ones in a sweet drink, it does really well to help balance it out. If you want to use more Amaro in your cocktail, you would go more towards the pastry style. How am I looking on time?
It's 47, so we should wrap it up.
Okay, well then I will wrap it up by just reading you my poem. My poem is basically the best way to recap this seminar. I wrote a poem called Il Poemaro. I was in Montana a couple days ago, and I had plenty of time on hand. And the poem goes like this: you are the perfect balance of bitter and sweet. I love you when mixed, and you're delightful served neat. Farmed from the tip of the Alps down to Syracuse, your natural ingredients will always amuse. Your old school labels can be so obscure and confusing, while the joy you bring is so uniquely amusing. So what do you mean by speciale or premiata? And what on earth is dita specializzata? If your style is pastry, sweet flavors abound. If you're medicinal in style, then herbal and bitter astound. There are Amari that balance both styles with class, but if you do not like any, consider kissing my glass. And with that, I will pass it back down to Daniela. I want to thank you all for attending the webinar today. I hope I did give you some valuable information, and I hope you can pass that down to your customers and guests.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. We have 2 upcoming webinars, like I said at the beginning, one on the 27th and one on the 31st. I'm sure we'll shoot you an email about it, but I think Micah had a couple of last minute, closing remarks.
Yeah, I basically really just wanted to thank you guys. Thank you so much, Livio, and I loved your poem. Wow. And thank you so much for answering all the questions that came in. I think it was a great session, and I'm really looking forward to see you guys this upcoming Thursday at 4 p.m. And yeah, have a great day. Take care, and see you Thursday. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.